The problem with Baiken is that she is power crept. Last week, Guilty Gear Strive came out with one final Season 3 patch. A patch to deal with a lot of complaints about the game's system and buff characters that were considered to be underperforming or not playing to their fullest potential. The problem is that most of the community considered Baiken to be one of those characters, and she got not only no changes, but she also got nerfed by the system mechanics. So in this video, I want to be more specific with the problems I have with Baiken and my hopes for the character. And I already mentioned the power creep, so from what perspective are we actually talking about? So the thing is, if you've been playing this game since launch, there were characters that were legitimately pretty weak. Some common community examples would be characters like Anji, and Faust, and Ino. Common problems that characters had on launch were things like buttons that were guaranteed to be punished by DPs, things with gaps, and difficulty converting hits into meaningful combos. Now that last thing is actually a pretty traditional Guilty Gear thing, but in Strive they have upped the conversion ability of basically every character in the game outside of a small handful. The thing is, from my perspective, Season 3 Baiken does not have that style of problem. In fact, especially if you're not super competitive in the game, Baiken has a great set of tools. Her core neutral tools, /, H Kabari, and Tatami Gaishi are some of the best defensive neutral control tools in the game in the right context. // is extremely active, as is H Kabari, and landing a random hit into H Kabari leads immediately into strong mix-ups. ID back to Tatami is a wall that is very difficult for many characters to actually get through. For offense, she has the unseeable overhead Yozan-san, which with meter leads into very high reward. And tether makes the opponent stay close to you. Most people talk about this from the opponent's perspective and the funny things they can do, but it's a pretty advantageous situation for Baiken as well. So all these tools are good, so what exactly is the problem? And the problem is not the tools themselves, it's just the way they work with each other. So take /. A standard character's // would easily convert into a heavy button, which means you would either get a knockdown of some sort, or maybe something from here. But Baiken's 5H actually has less range than her // and her 2S, so you can't use that as an option. But these moves are attack level 2 as well, and she has blue water assault, so you won't get a combo here either. 2H is another option, but since it's 17 frames, it's not going to connect unless there's a special circumstance. So either crouching or counter hit. So the big thing is that this normal is minus on hit, which again is a pretty typical Guilty Gear thing of being slightly minus on hit, and then there's an immediate exchange between the two players. The problem is that in this game, they have upped the conversion ability quite a bit compared to older Guilty Gear games. So again, Baiken is one of the only characters who is not good at converting their /. That one you probably heard of before, but there's also problems on other buttons. So 2H is a move that launches. And generally, one of her main combo parts is 2H into H Kabari. Now, the problem is, if you're too far, there's a range where 2H will work, but H Kabari will not, which is around here. And this can be a little bit hard to judge in match, and usually the response that players have is to use additional system resources. So using something like Blue Wild Assault, which will convert 100%, or using Roman cancel and assuming you're going to get it. Now, the nice thing about 2H is that it's not too difficult to Roman cancel on reaction because it launches, unlike /. Regardless, you're using additional resource that you may or may not have in that situation. 5 Heavy also has this problem where you have to actually be quite close to actually get this to combo, despite 5H being an attack level 4 move. Then you have air versus airs. So in Season 2, you might remember that Yozan-sen used to not send them launching, so it was very easy to just do this and get a combo. Now it is pretty difficult to finesse a combo here. Thankfully, people have found a solution to normal jump, a pretty reliable one that leads into a full combo. But the normal hit situation is not the best in the world compared to a lot of other characters, and also compared to what she had before. So her damage is really down compared to what she used to have. And to be honest, this is a problem that a lot of Baiken players complain about, but personally, I don't actually think it's too big of a deal. Not as big of a deal as 6P. So the thing is, some characters have this type of thing. So they have 6p into special cancel, 6p red wild assault. Now, Baiken 6p does not launch on normal hit or counter hit. So in the case of the counter hit, you can confirm, but on normal hit, you don't usually get anything. The tatami stomp is not like huge. So there is a range where you can easily connect the 6p, but the tatami will whiff. And since the 6p is attack level 2, you also don't have H Kabari as an option, and Blue Wild Assault is too slow. So there are situations that happen pretty commonly in matches actually, where you punish a mid poke and you don't get a combo. So if I got a counter hit here, it'd be no problem. But if I'm a little late, I get normal hit 6p, punish 6p, I don't get anything. 6p, while strong, is a pretty committal tool that has clear counters. And in the case that someone picks the correct counter, you will take a lot of damage, and if I'm right, I won't really get anything, again, unless I somehow have metered RC. So again, these problems were fine on launch, since a lot of characters had their legacy Guilty Gear weaknesses, but a lot of characters got the things tweaked over time. You even see it in the current patch notes where characters got improved combo ability. Some characters who I don't even think really needed it, like Axel, got the same thing as Anji, where his 5H now launches. And Baiken has gotten combo changes and some nerfs, honestly, over time, but nothing to make it really easier for her to convert. So this ties us into how it affects her in matchups. So typically there are two types of problems she has in matchups right now. And we're going to start with the more obvious one. We're going to talk about zoners. So for zoners, she has a few problems. One, she's not fast. She has a lot of traction on her run, which is fine. They did give her an anti-zoning tool in Gun. But this is pretty easy for characters to get around most of the time. And you're supposed to use it reactionary, but there's a lot of situations where you kind of have to just send it. And if you send it, then you're wasting that meter. You need that meter desperately to combo out Far Slash and raw 2H when you're not sure that H Kabari is going to connect. Zoning characters tend to use projectiles for their mix-ups and setups, which beats Parry. So Baiken is supposed to be like this defensive interactive character, but a lot of these zoners use projectiles to attack, and generally they are very advantageous on their projectiles. You've probably seen miracle situations like this, very inspirational mix-up, right? Not much I could really do about that once I get cursed and they have plenty of resource, right? And another problem with zoners comes from burst. So many zoners have not only advantage when they burst her, which is, I mean, obvious. You know, you're bursting, you're trying to reverse the situation. But then also on their burst, it can be pretty hard to actually chase them. So I'm quite literally trying to call out the Happy Chaos Curse. It's actually pretty difficult with her. The combination of she's not that fast, you have to run really far, you have to just predict what they're going to do really far in advance, just commit to it, makes it pretty hard. And if you don't actually take your turn, he can greed with steady aim, and then it's like you bursted him for what? This is pretty common amongst zoning characters. Not to mention being able to convert off pretty much everything. But then the other type of character are the characters that she should beat, but doesn't. So I actually posted a Baiken matchup chart near the end of 3.5 before I posted my last tier list, and people were really confused and thought I was kind of like trolling because I have a whole tier of like, these are characters I think Baiken should beat, but she doesn't. And they're like, why is that? So I'm using Mei as an example here because a lot of people, especially at high level, really dislike Mei. Mei, you know, is fast, has a fast backdash, has a great jump and great jump-ins, along with Dolphin, which is hard to see, leads into high reward, and is safe on block. On top of that, she has the Red Wild Assault, so that means she can do far buttons into Red Wild Assault. So previously on buttons like 2S, she would mostly just get this and be, depending on the version, -2 on hit, -1 on hit, or like 0 or +1 on hit. But now, because she has Wild Assault, a character that had the same issue with Baiken, just better frame data on hit, because she can cancel into Dolphin, now can break the wall from round start. Where again, Baiken does not have this ability at all. So what happens is Baiken's actually pretty decent at walling out Mei, but what happens really depends on how she pulls up on you. If she pulls up from the air, it's pretty reliable to get a combo. This type of confirm is pretty hard to get. So a lot of your round is swinging preemptively on hits that lead into nothing and protecting yourself with moves like tatami to protect the ground while seeing if they're coming from the air or not, and then preempting with things like jump D. But all they need is basically a stray and it's party time for them. So there are a lot of characters in this camp. Soul, in my opinion, Gold Lewis, May, and War are all like this. Now, conversions are not all doom and gloom though, because I love the way that I kind of mitigated this while playing her was using tether more. This move is pretty much her saving grace, and to be honest, I probably would have thought she was like bottom 2 or 1 in season 3.0, and even maybe 2.5 I would have started feeling really bad about her, and then 3.0 and 3.5 I just think she's bottom 1. This move does so much for this character because all these previous things I've said about bar slash and 2S do not actually apply when you're tethered. However, it is kind of odd to make the mid-range defensive character a 2-step character for combos. You do have to actually apply the tether. So even with this, the characters that I think she should beat but beat Baiken just out risk reward her. So it's funny, it's kind of like the old Milia problem of I have to hit somebody 4 to 5 times who's the same skill level as me, they have to hit me twice. And remember, in the previous patch, you had Water Cell knockdown too, so things could get out of hand pretty quickly, even though Baiken's defense is good enough to fight against that stuff. But the cherry top on all of this is that Baiken usually gets hit by stray nerfs. And most of the time, she doesn't get anything to compensate for it. This is why I kind of meme sometimes about like they forget that Baiken is in the game. So, I mean, sometimes they do give her something to compensate, right? So, many characters lost a property on special moves that have follow-ups. Baiken does have one. Comedy 2. So right now, if you hit a follow-up, you get this. It's a very small counter hit. It leads into a knockdown, so Baiken's is actually pretty good. It's better than characters like Chip, for example, in my opinion. But there are characters who maintain this, like Sin. He still has his medium counter hit, and his follow-up is safer than Baiken's. This is -3, Baiken's is -7. So Baiken's is pretty much universally punishable by 2Ks. Where Sin, even on IV, you still have throw range. But I don't mind this one too much because this is the same patch that they gave Baiken the clean hit gun combo, which is very, very valuable and does a ton of damage. And she gets this off a lot of stuff. They kind of nerfed it so that you could only do it in the corner. Before you could do it like anywhere on the screen, but still, it's a pretty good trade. Now, a big thing is parry damage being down. So they nerfed the parry damage in the same patch where Water Assault was added. I actually thought the reason why they did this is because she used to have parry, fast RC, charge blue Water Assault into a burst save combo that broke the wall. And I thought this was pretty strong. And if they didn't nerf the damage on parry on top of that, it would be like pretty crazy. So when I learned about that, I was like, you know, like the parry damage being down is not that bad. Like she could still side swap into wall break. She can spend meter into charge Water Assault and make it so they can't burst because the parry is considered a grab. So if you notice here, there's an X on the burst because you can't burst parry on like a DP. So I was like, you know, it's not that bad. But first they reduced the Water Assault burst damage, which is good for the game, but they didn't revert her parry damage. So one of her main threats against certain characters was reduced. People stopped caring about getting hit by parry unless I had resource to fight back. But then in this patch, they also removed the ability to do parry into RC both on whiff and on hit. And on like DPs, which have throw involved now. They used to lose the throw, which is kind of weird for a fighting game. It's like maybe the only fighting game I played where DPs lose to throws, so it's kind of like a normal reversal now. Baiken's parry does not have this luxury, so she doesn't get the improvement to the reversal. She doesn't get to RC into a combo, and she has the lower damage as well. So the main thing she's left behind with, and I'm going to admit something on YouTube for the first time. This is the Parry Super PRC. If you ever watched my stream, you heard me talk about a forbidden defensive technique. It was this. This is technically easier than it used to be, only because you can't do parry or PRC anymore. It used to be that it was pretty difficult to actually get everything to line up properly. So the way I would actually use this is most of the time if you saw me do parry PRC in a tournament set, it was probably actually this because the person was too scared to both meaty me and delay meaty me. So this would be the thing that I would use, and most of the time I'm like, I'm not even sure if I actually hit it because again, you could accidentally do the RC too fast and not have the super part come out, and then but like it looks the same anyway. There is an execution requirement behind it though, and it's pretty difficult to actually do as a reversal specifically compared to some of the other defensive techniques she had. But it's like the last crumb of like special thing she has with Parry for the moment. Also, another big source of my season 3 hopium came from the Wild Assault wall break. So I was actually a decent fan of this. I know that it was kind of snowballing, but I felt like it gave characters who weren't resource characters a way to be threatening after knockdowns because they were able to save their 50 meter for something else. So normally characters who have resource supers like Happy Chaos or Zato, or who are really good at getting their resources back like Asuka, they're really good on wall break. So they get all their resources back, they get passive meter gain, they get more damage, they get better defense, they get all this stuff. But for normal characters, they don't necessarily get that. So especially with having a really strong instant overhead option, the old knockdown was honestly really good, and a bunch of techniques came from that were really helpful. And she had a bunch of offensive sequences that involved wall break and wall breaking quickly that could lead into like a two-touch situation. So even though I thought she struggled in some matchups, I thought this was like an equalizer. So her, also Milia, and then also I think Johnny are really hurt by this. Johnny less because he has like vault, so you know you could just vault from full screen and still 50-50. And you can argue that okay, Milia's fast, so even if she doesn't get the wall break knockdown, then like it's fine. But in Baiken's case, she doesn't really have a neutral skip, and the main one is one that is not commonly used because it's difficult to use, which is the ID down BRC Yozansen technique, which frankly I think I've been doing this since 6 months after I started playing her, and it's still very uncommon that I see other Baiken players use this and use it correctly. So that goes to show you how difficult it is to use despite it being a neutral skip, and it's not in the same tier as like this. When I play her, I feel like I have the tools to compete, but the tools don't lead to stuff. And then you have her actual difficult matchups where you have to really predict what they're going to do ahead of time or play really passively while they out-resource you. You only had one chance usually to do something about what they do, and the main thing you would use to close the round doesn't knock down at the wall break anymore, so you have to keep wall now, which she's not like super good. She's okay at it, but she's not super good at it compared to other characters. It's just like a lot of the changes in this patch, like while I know it makes people happy, it hurts Baiken, and it's fine that they nerf things about her, but they keep not giving her stuff back. Some of you are pretty familiar with Arxis giving characters changes that you're like, this is cool, but like not really what she needed. So for example, the S Kabari change where she gets a throw combo here, meterless, is very nice. It's definitely a use for the held throw that basically no one used, but it doesn't fix her core problems. With all that yapping out of the way, how do we actually fix Baiken? I think there's pretty much 3 things it can do to fix her and just honestly just make her a solid mid tier. So one would be to just let her convert more often, fixing problems with far slash into 5H and 2S into 5H, 6P, and all the problems I mentioned before. Another thing they could do is add new properties to moves people don't really use a lot. So one would be, you might have forgotten that she has this. Once upon a time, you could not have multiple tatami mats on the screen at the same time, which you might be like, that's random, like, okay. But they gave her the ability, I believe this is in Season 2, to do an air tatami and immediately cancel it into ground tatami while the air tatami is still on the screen. I do believe the intent was to make it easier to combo off this because the air tatami's attack level 0 and is generally plus 15, so she would not really have a way to combo unless you really preempt. Like this. This is basically just a blind guess if I do this. I believe the intent was to actually give her an easy way to combo up this. Maybe not a full combo, but at least a knockdown that leads into offense, which I think is pretty clever. The problem is it's really hard to actually get the 2 hits to connect. This is normally what happens. Getting this specific thing to happen is extremely uncommon and very difficult, and it mostly comes from they didn't change the follow-up tatami. So I'm saying that like this, which is just a Tamigaishi, is different than this, which even though it looks the same, it's like canceling the air tatami to the ground tatami. If they change this somehow so it just is bigger, it would be easier to convert, but it might be kind of broken. I don't actually know how they fix this, but this would help her out a lot, because for a character that's supposed to specialize in defensive neutral and she has to preempt a lot with things like H Kaburi and Far Slash, you have to preempt with tatami too, but this is like one of your safest options. A pretty common counterplay is to just kind of swing a big button at her, because if you make her block and the tatami hits you, you're actually slightly plus, and you can just try to push your turn again. It's another kind of like blind guess. So it makes it hard to use that, even though you kind of have to use it. Another one would be H Kaburi 2. And you might be like, people use this all the time. And I would say you're correct, but there's an aspect of H Kaburi 2 that people don't use very commonly, which is the H Kaburi 2 run through. If you're a certain skill level and you're watching this, you're like, okay, you're capping. People literally use this, and they would be talking about this. But personally, I think this mix-up structure is pretty weak. You are exposing yourself to unnecessary risks that you can mitigate with safe jump, left, right, and like tatami and all this stuff. You're quite literally just putting yourself in their face with close slash and kind of just rolling the dice, which, while strong, is not that stable, which is the big reason why you don't see me really use this. So this is like the main use of this right now, and I'd really like to see more from this, because I think there's a lot of interesting things that you can do. Pretty much the main way I use this right now, outside of saving certain weird specific combos in tether, is as a situational corner escape. Because if people swing too quickly, then you actually switch sides, but that is pretty much counting on people swinging right away. Everyone has kind of different strategies around this, so this is something you could only sneak in like once every handful of games. My rule, like the Milia one winger per month, is 1 H Kaburi 2 hold through per like first to 3. And the last thing they could do is give her a new special move. I don't think it's super necessary, but I think out of the season 1 DLC characters, she probably needs it the most. Probably her and Testament, but definitely her needs it the most, as she is right now. There's a bunch of stuff they could do. Again, the things I would ask for would be a move that helps with converting more than anything else, and moves that help with projectiles. But really, the projectile thing is like, oh, that would be really nice, so then I could just only play Baiken. The combo thing is much more important. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. If you have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I try to not doom pretty much in this video and just be really direct. There's a couple of extra things that I actually left out that I think are like important, but it's just more of the same thing. An example would be like her jab not comboing to 6k on consistently and stuff like that. I am streaming. I am home again, so I'm streaming every day, you know, Monday through Friday on twitch.tv/LordKnight. Back at it. If you want Guilty Gear coaching, we have that over on Metafy. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.